They laughed when I served their coffee, sneered when I cleaned their conference room. The entire board treated me like I was invisible, just another disposable assistant. But when the billionaire CEO walked in and called me boss, their faces went white. Let me tell you how I bought their souls without them even knowing. Before I reveal how I made millionaires beg for mercy, I need you to understand something. This isn't just a revenge story. This is about every person who's ever been made to feel small, worthless, invisible. So if that's you, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you will change how you see power forever. My name is Violet Hayes, and for 8 months I was the executive assistant at Hartwell Industries, a luxury tech company in Manhattan. Every morning, I'd arrive at 6:30, brew the coffee, arrange the pastries, and prepare the boardroom for whatever meeting was scheduled that day. I wore simple clothes from Target, kept my hair in a plain ponytail, and spoke only when spoken to. To everyone at Hartwell, I was nobody, just another faceless assistant who'd be replaced the moment I made a mistake. And they made sure I knew it. Dominic Sterling, the VP of Operations, never called me by my name. To him, I was Coffee Girl or Hey You. He had this way of looking through me, like I was a ghost he couldn't quite see. One morning I brought him his usual order: black coffee, no sugar, exactly 180 degrees. He took one sip, made a face, and dumped the entire cup into the trash can beside his desk. "Wrong," he said flatly. "Do it again." The coffee wasn't wrong. I knew it wasn't wrong. But I went back downstairs to the cafe and got him another one, my hands shaking the entire time. When I returned, he didn't even look up from his phone. He just waved his hand dismissively, and I set the cup down and left. I heard him laughing with someone on the phone as I closed the door. "These assistants," he said, "they can't even get coffee right anymore." Petra Whitmore, the CFO, had a different approach. She was passive-aggressive, the kind of person who'd smile while stabbing you in the back. She'd assign me projects with impossible deadlines and then change the requirements halfway through. I remember spending 3 nights in a row, working until 3 in the morning, on a 200-page presentation for a shareholder meeting. I fact-checked every number, designed every slide to perfection, and printed the entire thing on premium paper. When I handed it to her that morning, exhausted but proud, she flipped through it for maybe 30 seconds before looking up at me with cold eyes. "It's adequate at best," she said loudly, enough for everyone in the office to hear. "I suppose it'll have to do, given your limitations." My limitations. As if I was the problem, not her constantly moving goalposts. Then there was Graham Locke, head of marketing, who seemed to take genuine pleasure in humiliating me. He'd make comments about my clothes, my hair, my background. "Did you get that sweater at a thrift store?" he asked once during a meeting, making everyone turn to look at me. "It's very economical." The way he said that last word made it sound like an insult. On his birthday, the entire office gathered for cake in the main conference room. I was standing near the door, not sure if I should enter, when Graham saw me. "Oh, sorry, Violet," he said with a smirk. "This is just for people who actually matter to the company." Everyone laughed. Even the other assistants looked away, embarrassed but unwilling to defend me. But the worst was Sienna Vale, a board member who treated me like a servant from another century. She'd snap her fingers at me across the room, throw documents at my desk instead of handing them to me, and once, she literally ordered me to pick up her dry cleaning during my lunch break. When I hesitated, because that wasn't in my job description, she leaned in close and whispered, "You're replaceable. Remember that." I'd go home every night to my tiny studio apartment and sit in the dark, wondering if maybe they were right. Maybe I didn't belong in their world. Maybe I was just fooling myself. But here's what they didn't know. Here's the secret I carried with me every single day as I endured their cruelty. My full name is Violet Hayes Morrison, and I'm not just any assistant. I'm the sole heir to Morrison Global Holdings, a private equity empire worth $8 billion. My father, Jonathan Morrison, built that fortune from nothing, And when he died 3 years ago, he left it all to me. I was 25 years old, suddenly one of the wealthiest women in the country, and completely unprepared for what came next. Before he passed, my father gave me one piece of advice that changed everything. We were in his hospital room, and he could barely speak, but he grabbed my hand and pulled me close. "Violet," he whispered, "never trust people who kiss up to you. Trust the people who show you who they really are when they think you're powerless." He made me promise that before I took over his company, I'd spend time in the real world, where people didn't know my name or my bank account. "See how they treat someone they think can't fight back," he said. "That's when you see their true character." So 6 months before I started at Hartwell Industries, I had my team at Morrison Global secretly acquire 51% of the company through a network of shell corporations. We were careful, meticulous. The board had no idea they'd been bought. They thought they were still independent, still in control of their little kingdom. And then I applied for a job as an executive assistant under my mother's maiden name, Hayes. No references to Morrison, no hint of my real identity. Just another applicant desperate for a job. For 8 months, I watched them. I documented everything. I wore glasses with hidden cameras. I carried a bag with recording devices. And what I discovered was so much worse than I imagined. Dominic wasn't just arrogant. He was a thief. I found evidence of kickback schemes with suppliers, routing money into offshore accounts. He'd been stealing nearly $2 million a year from the company. And no one had noticed because Petra was covering for him. The CFO herself had been cooking the books, hiding losses, and falsifying reports to make their numbers look better than they were. Graham had 7 sexual harassment complaints buried in HR files, 7 women whose careers were destroyed because they spoke up against him. And Sienna, she'd been insider trading for years, using confidential information from board meetings to make illegal stock trades. I had timestamps, transaction records, everything. But I wanted more than just evidence. I wanted them to show me exactly who they were. I needed the world to see it too. The breaking point came 3 days before the annual shareholders meeting. There was a board meeting about restructuring, which was corporate speak for firing people to cut costs. I was setting up the room when Sienna arrived early. She didn't realize I was still there, hidden behind the projection screen, adjusting the cables. I heard her on the phone with someone. "We need to trim the fat," she said, "starting with these useless assistants, especially that Hayes girl. She's been here 8 months and hasn't done anything impressive. Let's cut her tomorrow and save the salary." She laughed. One less nobody to worry about. I stood there frozen, my hands clenched into fists. Tomorrow. They were going to fire me tomorrow. And the cruel irony was that tomorrow was the day I was going to reveal everything. That night I called Bradley Reeves, the CEO of Hartwell Industries. Bradley was one of the few people who knew my real identity. He'd been my father's friend and had agreed to help with this investigation. "They're planning to fire me tomorrow," I told him, before the shareholder meeting. "Perfect," Bradley said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Let them think they've won. It'll make what comes next so much sweeter." The next morning, I arrived at 6:30 as always. I made the coffee, arranged the pastries, and prepared the conference room. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. The board arrived around 8, extra arrogant today because they were expecting big bonuses from the successful quarter that Petra had fabricated. Dominic saw me and smirked. "Last day on the job, coffee girl. Make it count." So they'd already decided. They were just waiting to tell me after the meeting, probably hoping to humiliate me one last time. At 8:30, Sienna arrived and immediately found a reason to torment me. She was carrying a cup of coffee, and as she passed my desk, she accidentally knocked it over onto my shirt. Hot coffee soaked through the fabric, and I gasped from the heat. "Oops," she said, not even trying to sound sincere. "Maybe you should wear something less cheap. Better quality might resist stains." The board members who'd arrived laughed. Dominic leaned back in his chair. "Should we get her a bib with the company logo?" might be more her style. I excused myself, went to the bathroom, and cleaned up as best I could. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the stains spreading across my chest, but I also saw something else in my eyes. Fire, pure focused fire. At 9 o'clock, the shareholders started arriving. The board looked confused because they didn't recognize most of the faces. These weren't their usual investors. These were my people from Morrison Global Holdings, dressed in expensive suits and carrying tablets with all the evidence we'd compiled. Bradley arrived at 9:15, looking unusually serious. He barely acknowledged the board, which was strange because he was usually warm with them. Instead, he walked directly to where I was standing in the corner and whispered, "Ready?" I nodded. The meeting began. Bradley stood at the head of the table and cleared his throat. "Before we begin regular business, we have a special announcement." The board members leaned forward, probably expecting him to announce their bonuses. "I'd like to introduce the majority shareholder of Hartwell Industries, someone who has been with us for quite some time." He paused for effect. "Please welcome Ms. Violet Hayes Morrison, CEO of Morrison Global Holdings." The silence was deafening. I stood up from my corner, removed my glasses, and let my hair down. I'd worn a tailored blazer under my cardigan, and I removed the cardigan now, revealing the professional outfit beneath. I walked to the front of the room, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor, and every eye in that room was on me. Dominic's face had gone completely white. Petra's hands were shaking so badly she knocked over her water glass. Graham tried to laugh, but it came out as a choked sound. This is a joke, right?" "No joke," I said, and my voice was different now, confident, commanding, the voice I'd been hiding for 8 months. "For the past 8 months, I've worked as an executive assistant in this company. A company that, unbeknownst to you, my organization purchased controlling interest in through a series of shell corporations." I pulled out my tablet and displayed the ownership documents on the screen behind me. "I now own 51% of Hartwell Industries. You work for me." Sienna found her voice. "This is illegal. You can't just—" "I can and I did," I interrupted. "Every transaction was legal and approved by our attorneys. But that's not why we're here today." I pulled up the next slide. "I came here to see how you treated people you thought were beneath you. People you thought couldn't fight back." What happened next was the most satisfying moment of my life. I played a video compilation of their worst moments over the past 8 months. The insults, the humiliation, the mockery. I'd edited it myself, chronological order, with timestamps. There was Dominic dumping the coffee, Petra calling my work adequate at best, Graham's birthday comment, Sienna's replaceable threat. The conference room was completely silent, except for the audio from the video. But then came the twist, the moment even I hadn't fully planned for. "However," I said, pausing the video, "there's something else you should know. One of you actually figured out who I was. One of you knew for the past 2 months that I was Violet Morrison. And you said nothing." The board members looked at each other in confusion and suspicion. Who had known? Who had betrayed them? I pulled up an email on the screen. It was from Graham Locke to an external email address dated 2 months ago. "I think the new assistant might be Violet Morrison, the billionaire heiress," it read. "She matches the photos from society pages. Should we say something?" Graham shot to his feet. "That's private correspondence. You can't—" "I can when it involves conspiracy," I said coldly. "Because here's what you did, Graham. You figured out who I was, and instead of telling your colleagues, you tried to blackmail me." I pulled up the next email, where Graham had sent a message to an anonymous account I'd been monitoring. "Pay me $5 million, or I'll expose you to the board and ruin your investigation." The room erupted. Dominic turned on Graham. "You knew? You knew and you tried to profit from it?" "It gets better," I continued, "because Graham didn't just try to blackmail me. He also contacted a tabloid journalist and tried to sell the story for $2 million. He was going to expose me, destroy my investigation, and pocket $7 million total." I showed the messages, the bank account numbers, everything. Graham's face had turned purple. You can't prove I can prove everything, I said, because you used your company email for some of it, you absolute fool. I turned to Bradley. Mr. Reeves, would you like to explain what we found in Mr. Locke's office computer? Bradley stood up, looking at Graham with disgust. We found communications with 17 different women in this company. Not just harassment, he was running an entire operation. He'd identify vulnerable female employees, harass them until they complained, then offer to make the complaints disappear in exchange for sexual favors. He's been doing this for 5 years. The color drained from every face in the room. Even Dominic and Petra, who'd known about some of Graham's behavior, looked shocked. But here's the real twist, I said, and I felt my voice shake with ire. One of those women was my cousin, Rebecca Morrison. She worked here 4 years ago as a junior analyst. Graham destroyed her career, her reputation, and her mental health. She left this company broken, and she never told anyone in my family what happened because she was ashamed. It wasn't until I started this investigation that she finally told me the truth. I looked directly at Graham. You didn't just harass strangers, you harassed my family, and you thought you'd get away with it forever. Graham tried to run. He actually stood up and tried to leave the conference room, but security was already at the door. 2 officers stepped forward and blocked his path. Graham Locke, one of them said, you're under arrest for attempted blackmail and extortion. The other charges will follow. They handcuffed him right there in the boardroom and led him away. He was screaming about lawyers and lawsuits, but his voice faded as they took him down the hall. I turned to the remaining board members. As for the rest of you, I pulled up the evidence files. Dominic, we have complete records of your embezzlement. $2 million over 3 years, routed through 6 different offshore accounts. The FBI is already involved. Dominic's head dropped into his hands. Petra, your accounting fraud goes back 5 years. You've been hiding losses and inflating profits, putting this entire company at risk. The SEC has been notified. Petra started crying, mascara running down her face. And Sienna, your insider trading is documented with timestamps that match your stock purchases perfectly. Your accounts have been frozen as of this morning. Sienna stood up, her chair scraping loudly. Please, she said, and her voice was desperate. Miss Morrison, I have children. I'll lose everything. I looked at her for a long moment. You should have thought about them before you committed federal crimes. You should have thought about them when you told me I was replaceable and worthless. I paused. You wanted to fire me yesterday to save my salary. How much was I making, Sienna? $45,000 a year. That's what you thought I was worth. Well, I just saved this company from bankruptcy due to your collective fraud. I think my value might be slightly higher than $45,000. Security escorted all 3 of them from the building. No severance packages, no second chances, legal action pending for everything we'd uncovered. When they were gone, I turned to the remaining employees who'd gathered in the hallway, watching everything unfold. I saw the other assistants, the junior analysts, the people who'd been too afraid to speak up. This company is under new management, I said, and we're going to rebuild it on a foundation of respect, not fear. If anyone here has experienced harassment, discrimination, or abuse, please come forward. You will be heard, you will be believed, and there will be consequences for the people who hurt you. Over the next few weeks, 12 more employees came forward with complaints. We fired 6 more executives, restructured 3 departments, and implemented new policies for reporting and accountability. The assistants who'd been kind to me during my time undercover got promotions. The junior employees who'd shown integrity got raises. We brought in counselors for the people Graham had targeted, and the company transformed. Within 6 months, our employee satisfaction scores had tripled. Productivity increased by 40%. Profits followed. Turns out when you treat people with dignity and respect, everyone benefits. But here's what I want you to understand. I didn't do this just for revenge. Though I won't lie, watching their faces when they realized who I was felt incredible. I did this because people like them exist everywhere, in every company, every organization, every community. They target people they think are powerless, people who can't fight back, and they get away with it because we're taught to accept it, to keep our heads down, to just survive. My father taught me that real power isn't about titles or bank accounts. It's about using whatever influence you have to expose injustice and protect the vulnerable. It's about remembering what it feels like to be powerless and refusing to let others experience that same pain. To everyone watching who's ever been dismissed, mocked, underestimated, or made to feel invisible, your worth is not determined by how others treat you. Document everything. Build your case, find your allies, and when the moment comes, let your truth be louder than their lies. As for me, I'm still running Hartwell Industries, but I'm not doing it from a corner office. I'm doing it from the ground up, working alongside the people who actually make this company run. The assistants, the analysts, the people who come in early and stay late because they care about their work. Because I learned something during those 8 months. The people at the top aren't always the most powerful. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone underestimates. If this story taught you something about standing up for yourself and others, hit that like button right now. Subscribe for more stories about justice, karma, and people getting exactly what they deserve. Drop a comment telling me, have you ever been underestimated? What happened? I read every single one. And remember, be kind to everyone you meet. You never know who's really in charge or what they're capable of when you push them too far. My name is Violet Hayes Morrison, and I was never just an assistant.